nuance. I am sweating. It's a gorgeous day outside and I decided to go for a walk and run some errands, and I'm so glad that I did, but now, yeah, the perspiration is happening. I'm going to do a theater review today, and I haven't done one in a really long time, but I wanted to tell you about a play that I went to see this week called In the Next Room, the Vibrator play. And as you may have guessed from the title, it does focus on vibrators. Specifically, it focuses on the way vibrators were used sort of towards the end of the 19th century. And they were sort of seen as a medical device, and they were used to treat what they believed was a disorder primarily in women called hysteria. And so how the vibrator would be used is that the doctor would apply the vibrator to the patient to bring her to paroxysm, and this was thought to relieve, a lot of her nervous systems caused by her disorder. So the play focuses on Dr. and Mrs. Givings, and Dr. Givings is a scientist. He's obsessed with electricity and his new device, and he treats the women in his community for hysteria. Meanwhile, his own wife is frustrated with the lack of connection in their marriage, and she's also very jealous and wounded because she has a new baby and she isn't able to adequately breastfeed her baby and has to rely on a wet nurse. So the play is a lot about sort of the disconnect that can happen between our very sort of basic human primal needs and societal expectations and our intellect. The play is really, really funny in parts, and I was laughing my ass off because there's some amazing broad comedy with the vibrator and these characters just being completely unaware of their sexuality. They don't even make any sort of connection with what the doctor's doing or what the patients are experiencing and sex, and yet that's also a source of a great deal of sadness in the play because you see how much pain it causes when they don't even have a language to connect their physical experiences with sex or sexuality. They just aren't, there's no awareness there. So there are parts of the play that are really, really sad as well. There were a couple of things that I noticed or appreciated specifically. So there are a couple of things that kind of that were fun for me personally. So one of the things is that the vibrator that they use is an antique vibrator, and I remember seeing a similar model when I was at the Vibrator Museum in San Francisco, and I was like, oh my god, that's an actual antique vibrator, and it's really awesome to see it on stage and being used. That's really fun. Something else that I really appreciated was the way that the actors portrayed their paroxysms or orgasms. And it wasn't really what a lot of us, myself included, sort of typically associate with what an orgasm looks and sounds like. And the reason I really like that is because I went to a lecture fairly recently where a woman was talking about the fact that specifically the sounds that a lot of people make during orgasms, those sounds are very much influenced by the media that we see around sex. So for example, the sounds that people make here in North America are typically quite different than the sounds people make in, say, Japan or China. And the sounds have a very direct correlation. They mimic the sort of sounds that you would see in the pornography in different cultures. So our sort of tendencies, are clearly influenced by our media. And so because these people are living in a time where A, there was no media influence, and B, it wasn't even something that they connected with sex or sexual pleasure, their orgasms would have been sort of very organic. They would have been quite varied. One person's orgasm would have sounded very different from another person's orgasm. And I thought the actors did that really, really well. It felt very much like a sort of instinctive, sort of almost uncontrollable sound and like noise and physicality, as opposed to something that is expected. So that was fun. There was I did have one sort of sex educator red flag, and it didn't ruin the play or anything, and I don't even think that most people would notice it. There's one point where the doctor uses an anal vibrator on a male patient. He has like a rare case of male hysteria. And so it's pretty obvious that this male patient is not used to anal stimulation, and the vibrator that the doctor uses, it's not huge, but it was like, it just seems a little large for somebody who hasn't ever done this before, and there was no lube. So it's just like, oh, I don't think that would induce pleasure or orgasm. I think that would be really painful, and it's not safe. And so my little internal voice was like, use lube, oh my God. But, it was okay. It was also a really straight vibrator, and usually to do prostate stimulation you want something that has a bit of a curve, but you never know. Probably with the vibration it would be indirect stimulation, so it's fine. It's like a minor point and I'm probably the only person in the audience who cared about that. Something else that I noticed, and I don't know that I have a problem with it, I just noticed it, is that the character of the wet nurse, Elizabeth, is a black woman. At one point she's speaking with Mrs. Givings and one of the doctor's other patients. These are two white women, very proper, sort of upper middle class. And the two white women are describing the sensation of their paroxysms. And again, it's very clear that they have no sense that this has anything to do with like their sexuality or sexual desire. But Elizabeth immediately says, well, you're talking about what happens when you're having sex with your husband, right? And they laugh and laugh because that's absurd to them. And I just thought it was interesting that the black woman was clearly, she was more sexual and more sexually attuned than these two white women. And I just know that there's sort of this stereotype that's persisted for a long time that black people are inherently more sexual and black people can be more sexualized and fetishized than white people. So like I said, I don't know that I had a problem with it, but I just sort of noticed it. I was like, okay. Overall, I really enjoyed it. The ending wasn't my favorite. Like I said, the play has this sort of sad, dark undertone to it, and then suddenly in the last like quarter of the play, it sort of switches and it actually moves towards this happy ending that I didn't love, even though usually I love happy endings in when it comes to sex, but it didn't seem to fit with this kind of play. That having been said, the performances were still really, really fantastic, and I certainly didn't hate the ending by any means. I thought it was going to end sooner than it did, and the point at which I thought it was going to end, I thought would have been a stronger ending, but it's a minor quibble. Other fun fact, the play, which was written by Sarah Ruhl, was first developed and performed by the Berkeley Repertory Theater, and I'm going to be living in Berkeley, just a few streets away from the Repertory Theater in a few weeks, so that was just sort of a fun personal bit of trivia for me when I read the program. Highly recommend the Vibrator play. If you're in Ottawa, you can go check it out at the Gladstone Theatre. I'm going to put all the details down below. And if you've seen the Vibrator play, either this particular production or another production, tell me about it. Tell me what you thought about it. Leave some comments down below. Or if you do go to see it, then come back here and then tell me what you thought about it, because I would love to know. Anyway, yeah, that's my theater review, and I will see you guys really soon in another video. In the meantime, go out and enjoy this great weather if you're in my neck of the woods. Okay, take care. Bye.